What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Stand Up Guys Podcast, episode 150, baby. No enthusiasm?
All right, let's do it.
150. I've only missed the last 50.
That voice is our returning champion, my brother from the same father, Lester Jones Jr.
I told you, never call me Junior.
Isn't it Don't Call Me Jr.?
Don't call me Junior. Look what you did.
And, of course, joining me as always, star of the porn parody, Indiana Bones and the Dangle Dong of Destiny, it's the phenomenal A.J. Singh.
Yeah, the Romans were trying to get their hands on this too for thousands of years.
The Nazis.
So if you haven't guessed, it is this is going to be our review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And as I mentioned, it is episode 150, a milestone episode. So thank you very much for anyone who's joined us on our adventures. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Why wouldn't you want to have fun with us each and every week? And speaking of things that start with IND, shout out randomly to Indonesia. YouTube analytics, who would have known that for some reason we're getting big views in Indonesia. So shout out to all of our Indonesian fans. And if you are one, please comment and let us know why. I'm curious. But no matter where you are in the world, we thank you for listening very much. So anyone who hasn't listened to our reviews, not only are we going to give you just a quick non-spoiler review like every channel does, but then what differentiates us is we're then going to do a nice deep dive, scene-by-scene analysis of the movie, and we hope you'll have fun. So yeah, spoiler-free, guys. I'll move on to Rotten Tomatoes just to kind of set everything up. The movie currently sits at a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, directed by James Mangold. I thought it was funny. Two of the writers on this movie, Jez and John Henry Buttersworth.
The Buttersworth.
The classic, yeah.
Heir to the Buttersworth fortune. The movie, of course, stars Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena, Antonio Banderas is Ronaldo, and I got to be honest, I did not recognize him in the movie. I was surprised to read this. I was like, oh, that was him. Okay.
I thought it was Pedro Pascal at first, and then I was like, okay, wait, that's Banderas. Yeah.
John Rhys-Davies is Sala. Shaunette Renee Wilson is Mason. Thomas Kretschmann is Colonel Weber. Toby Jones is Basil Shaw. Boyd Holbrook is Kleber. Olivier Richters is Hawk. Ethann Isidore is Teddy, and Mads Mikkelsen is Dr. Voller. All right, guys, spoiler-free, what did you think of this thing?
I mean, it was what I expected from an Indiana Jones movie. Like, there were some major, scientific breakthroughs, I'd say, but beyond that, it was a fun adventure movie.
And you?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was probably better than the last one.
Certainly, yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know if it's quite as strong as some things. I have some problems with it, but on the whole, not bad.
Yeah, I have a similar opinion. Yeah, anyone who's worried that this one was going to be worse than Crystal Skull, I can put those fears at rest. This is definitely better than Crystal Skull. But overall, does it reach the, anywhere close to the original trilogy movies? I have to say no. So overall, I can just give this movie an okay. I think it's solid. But as we go through it, we'll get into it, but there is some problems. What do you guys think of the cast? I will say I like the addition of Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I'm a fan of hers. If anyone hasn't seen her Amazon show Fleabag, that's a great show. I highly recommend it.
I think she's good at portraying her character. I just hated her character.
Well, it's funny because she is written, I think, purposely so to be somewhat unlikable, at least in the beginning.
Well, there's that element which kind of comes in, but she also has this charm and easygoingness, which plays pretty well at certain points. But there's other points where she's like that, and you're like, okay, she's clearly a psychopath.
Yeah. Yeah, the stuff,
like straight through psychopath.
but an entertaining psychopath. I liked her in the cast. I did also like. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen is always good. As we'll get into it, there's certain things about his character where, well, I don't want to spoil, but there's just a certain ridiculous aspect about what happens to him in the story. I'm trying to think. There's another character I'll get into too that once we find out what happened to her, I'm like, I don't know if she really served a purpose at all in the story. So yeah, and then you and I were talking when we got out of the movie, and I mean, I guess this is true a little bit in all the Indiana Jones movies, but there's a formula where in this movie especially that you feel it's like they go to this location, this thing happens. They go to this other location, same essential thing happens, and they go to this location, and it just kind of keeps happening.
It happened. It felt like it happened so many times that it was just like, I felt like I felt like there was an extra middle act or something in there. It just felt drawn out.
My favorite movie in this series is Last Crusade, and that movie is paced so well. Like you just go through it and it feels so smooth. This movie, it's about 2.5 hours, and you do feel it at points. Not that you're not like they throw a lot of entertaining stuff at you, but there are a few times where you feel the time I feel in this movie. Whereas Last Crusade, it just kind of smooths by.
One thing I do kind of appreciate is building character inside the action scenes. You don't see that a lot. A lot of times it's just like pure action. And it's kind of an interesting play, the way they did some of those things, I felt like.
That's true. I think you get some of like, Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character especially, some playfulness from her pops out. Indy, of course, gets some lines in there that you're like, oh yeah, that's Indiana Jones. We'll get into it too, but this Teddy kid they introduced, I didn't mind him, but it did feel like, hey, people like Short Round. Can we think of another Short Round? I think that pretty much sums up our thoughts. Except I will ask you guys, where would you rate this just on a basic level of see it in theaters, wait for streaming, don't watch it all?
I'll go wait for streaming. I think
I'm there with you. I think if you're a diehard India fan, I mean, you're going to go probably see this in theaters anyway. But yeah, I think if you're anywhere on the fence, I think you can wait for streaming for this. What about you?
I'd say it's worth a trip to the theater. I don't know if there's anything else in theaters worth seeing right now anyway. So,
well, if anyone listened to our Flash review, it's.
Well, we mentioned it. For opening weekend, it didn't seem that full.
That's true. I just read an article. It did come in number one at the box office, but it made $60 million and allegedly has a budget of around $300 million, making it maybe unlikely, unless it has just really good legs, unlikely that it'll make a profit.
They've been throwing so much money in these movies, and you're seeing a lot of them that aren't paying off. Like some pay off big and some are really just hurting. Yeah,
I am wondering if studios are going to maybe for the better, start trying to make these movies for a more reasonable budget.
Yeah. I don't know if all the CGI is worth it. Or these $50 million paychecks to actors.
That's another thing we'll get into early on in our spoiler review is some questionable CGI in this movie. Yeah. But with that being said, guys, should we just do it? Should we get into spoiler territory?
Let's do it.
All right, guys, spoilers ahead. So I made notes for this movie, and boy, there's a lot of them. But no, this is going to be entertaining. I think there's a lot of good stuff here. So I'm going to go through my notes, and if you guys just chime in whenever you want to talk about something. So we open the movie during, I guess it's basically towards the end of World War II. It seems like it's wrapping up, coming to an end.
Yeah, they said the Führer was in hiding and stuff like that.
Yeah, so. It seems like the Nazis are coming to a close. We're at a Nazi castle that's being attacked. And the Nazis have captured a man with a bag over his head. I just wonder who that could be. So yeah, I wrote the captured or the man is revealed to be Uncanny Valley Harrison Ford. And so yeah, let's get into. I mean, this particular scene was in the trailer, where they pull the bag off of his head and you see young Indiana Jones. And man, with this de-aging stuff, I think in a limited capacity, if they're not moving too much, not talking too much, it can look okay. But as we're gonna go through this whole opening action scene, it's using de-aged Harrison Ford, and there is an Uncanny Valley very video gamey quality to it, and it does look weird in spots. Do you guys disagree?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little weird. I honestly couldn't tell that much of a difference between the actual him versus the actual they still looked old to me either way.
Oh, you think the model that you still kind of looks older?
I was like, he should be dead by the time.
I mean, I assume they based it off of his appearances in the original trilogy, which he was in his in his 30s, I think, 30s to late 30s, but. For me, yeah. Once it got in motion and it was talking, I was like, boy, I don't know if they should have went this route. I heard many years ago somebody was pitching an Indiana Jones movie, and they said they thought it would be cool to basically cast a younger Indiana Jones, in this kind of way, but then And then, if they made more Indiana Jones movies, they could just carry forward that younger actor telling, younger period Indiana Jones movies. And now that I saw this scene, I'm thinking that might have been a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
They could make another actor look like Indiana Jones.
But of course, the only thing there is I don't know if Harrison Ford would have been on board with that. Famously, I think Steven Spielberg was against that. He said he couldn't envision anyone else in the role, which I think is silly. I mean, it's only a matter of time before they do eventually make more Indiana Jones movies with a different actor. So to me, it maybe would have made more sense. And also, the CGI here is probably very expensive for a return that doesn't look great. So I don't know. I think it might have been a better idea to cast a younger actor here. But getting back to the story. So the Nazis include a scientist named Dr. Voller, played by Mads Mikkelsen. And they have found what they believe to be the Spear of Destiny, although they call it something else in this movie, like the Lance of something or other.
Yeah.
But
yeah, whoever stabbed Jesus.
Exactly. It's the knife or whatever that supposedly stabbed Jesus prior to the crucifixion. So there's a Nazi general, and he believes that Indiana Jones probably had some sort of co-conspirator, with him. So he sent some soldiers to search the perimeter for whoever Indy's partner is. And that partner, who is captured, turns out to be a fellow archaeologist named Basil Shaw. Although I think he call him Bass or Base or something?
Yeah, it might be Baz.
Baz, yeah, I think that's right. Instead of Basil, just calls him Baz. So a group of Nazis hang Indy by the neck from the top of the castle, around a gargoyle or something. But a large bomb crashes through the ceiling, and instead of immediately exploding, it basically falls through that floor, and it falls through many floors, all the way to the basement, and then it explodes upwards, and that basically killing all the Nazis and freeing Indy. Now, here's the thing. I don't know much about bombs, but how likely do you think it is that bomb wouldn't have just exploded on impact?
Right.
I mean, I guess it happens, but
This might be one of the... It's less egregious than the nuking of the fridge in Crystal Skull.
This was pretty bad. Throughout the movie, there's a theme of just Indiana Jones surviving the worst situations. He should have been dead 1,000 times.
yeah, that's what we're talking about. Is they capture him, He escapes.
Yeah.
He figures something out. They capture him. He escapes.
Well, yeah.
It's like it repeats like over and over.
Well,
and over.
it's like they find out where they need to go to chase the
right.
the thing. They get there. They find it. The bad guy shows up just in time. They got to escape. They get the next clue. They go to the next place. They find the thing. Then they're immediately
Well, I mean, the bad guy had so many chances to shoot him, like to kill him. Was there ever really a need for him to keep him alive or anything?
Well, I mean, he is an expert in the field, so he can. So it kind of does make sense until the final thing is put together that they might want his help in finding everything. But in the end, when he chooses not to kill him, I think it's more of a, oh, I want this guy to have to now look at me succeed kind of thing. Watch me succeed in my plan, which I'm okay with, but yeah, it was a bad idea on his part. Okay. So yeah, he escapes the hanging. So as the fighting intensifies, the Nazis end up leaving the castle. So there's a Nazi general who gets on a train that's leaving. He's interrogating Basil on the train. The train also contains Dr. Voller and many Nazi soldiers. And I should also add all the treasures and artifacts that the Nazis have stolen.
Yeah, that's part of the reason they're there is because apparently they've amassed quite the collection.
Right. So now Indy dresses as a Nazi and he commandeers a Nazi car, but then other Nazis, like higher-ranking Nazis, get in the back seat, thinking of him as just like their driver. So he starts driving, and he's following these motorcycles. The car is preceded by two motorcycles with sidecars. But Indy knows he has to go after the train, so he veers off towards the train. And then, of course, the motorcycles are like, oh, something's up, so they follow. He takes out one of the motorcycles, and then he jumps from the car to the other motorcycle, and that car ends up crashing, and so those Nazis die. And then he ends up taking out the guys on the bikes, too, and catching up to the train. So now Indy pretends to be like a Nazi commander, and he gets possession of the Spear of Destiny. The two soldiers he takes it from kind of like find out that, he's not who he's portraying, but he's able to basically lock them in their train compartment, and he goes into the compartment that has all the treasure in it, and he opens the box. And so Indy examines the spear, and he comes to the conclusion that it's a fake. It's not the real Spear of Destiny. At the same time, Dr. Voller interrupts the general who's interrogating Basil, and he tells him the same thing, that he found out that the spear is a fake. Now, was there a little bit of misdirection? Because I remember at the castle, like, they kind of zoomed in on Mads Mikkelsen because he had, like, a briefcase, and I was like, what are they getting at? Is this guy, like, stealing the spear or something? But that didn't end up being the case.
Well, it cut to him because he didn't have the spear, but he had the dial, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I think it was hinting that he just had something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, he lets the Nazi general know that the spear is a fake, but he does have half of this dial invented by Archimedes. It has a name like Archaeopteryx or some weird thing.
It's hard to pronounce.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I don't know if he actually, I don't think he says it here, but basically this thing has some sort of time travel property, allegedly. So now the Nazis, we find out that treasure car the Indy's in also had like a bunch of like sleeping Nazis in it. And I think the other two Nazis he pissed off maybe finally made enough noise that they start like waking up. So what he does, he ends up using the fake spear to jam the lock all those Nazis in a train car as well, and he starts like moving forward. But those Nazis are able to set off an alarm, and so the general who's interrogating Basil and a few of his men head towards the back to look for him. Indy ends up blending in with some other Nazis who are eating, and they pass by him. So Indy goes to the front of the train and finds Basil and ends up freeing him. Oh, and then for some reason, like they had his bag of gear containing his whip and his hat, and it was on the train car there.
Yeah, Basil was holding it when they captured him or something.
Yeah, something like that. So Dr. Voller shows up. Indy punches him out, and they take him and Basil take the dial. So they're going to the kind of, further up on the train car, and there's like this huge gun, but I think they're British airplane bombers start like bombing the train, and it causes the mounted gun to just like go crazy. It like turns backwards and like starts shooting up the train behind them.
Yeah.
So like it shoots up a bunch of Nazis and a bunch of train compartments in the back. So Indy and Basil go to the top of the train, but they are tracked down and confronted by the Nazi general, who also gets up top. So Indy and the general get in a fight. In the scuffle, Basil ends up getting a gun, and he accidentally shoots Indy. Does he just like graze him in the hand or something?
Yeah, I want to say it was in the arm or forearm or something.
It doesn't seem like it like stuck or something. I think it was just like a flesh wound or something.
Just a flesh
Just
wound.
a flesh wound. The Nazi ends up like choking out Indy, and then I think Basil does eventually like correctly shoot the general, and so he gets off the train. But then Dr. Voller shows up. He's hanging on the side of the train, and he kind of gets the drop on Indy and Basil. He's got his gun pointed at him, and he basically demands them give the dial back. So Indy tosses the bag that had the dial in it to Voller. Now, here's the thing. He is violently hit with either like a mailbag hook or some kind of beam that's sticking out.
Yeah, I think it was like a mail hook, but yeah, it's like a 4x4 beam.
Right. And so we talked about this. He 100% should be dead. And if he's not dead, when he shows up later in the movie, he should have like the worst like facial scar, like none of his original teeth.
Yeah, he should be like Elephant Man or something because he's going to be fucked up.
He should be in a bad way.
It comes to this later, but apparently he moved to America and got a job as a top scientist working at NASA.
Right.
Yeah, they never explained that, like how he managed to survive that
Unscathed.
Yeah, like there should have been some team of doctors working on him for like a decade or something.
Well, it's funny because Mads Mikkelsen has played a James Bond villain, but I'm like, he should look like a James Bond villain in this
Yeah.
movie. He should have like a wicked facial scar.
He should have enough brain damage that he was never inventing rockets to send Americans to the moon.
Very true. If he's alive, his brain should not be well.
And it had been like 50 years since then. He should have been like much older looking too.
They did age him some, like some gray, but yeah.
It would have been about 25 years.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think mostly it was just his hair that changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I think that the British destroy the bridge up ahead that the train is on. So like Indy and Basil have no choice but to jump in the river. And Indy reveals that he did the classic switcheroo, and he had the dial hidden on his body somewhere. In his pants, I guess.
They jumped off like from a couple hundred feet up into a river. The way Basil landed, I'm pretty sure he died.
I mean, I'll give him credit. That was maybe survivable. That seemed more believable to me than the bomb not immediately exploding.
Basil seemed like so unathletic and so incapable of surviving in those terrains.
He should have had a rough go of it. Okay, so now we cut to old Indiana Jones. It's the year 1969. He's woken by his hippie neighbors playing their loud rock and roll music. When he goes to complain, they tell him that they're celebrating Moon Day. Turns out that this is the day the shuttle is going up the launch to the trip to the moon. It's also revealed as he's making his morning coffee or whatever that Marion has served Indy with divorce papers, and he ends up covering up her face on the fridge with a magnet. So now we cut to Indy teaching. He's, of course, a professor at the college. He's teaching a class that is conveniently about Archimedes.
Yeah.
This seemed a bit forced, but okay. All of his students are distracted by the parade being set up outside to celebrate the moon launch. And the only person paying attention in his class is Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character. Eventually, students wheel in a TV about the moon launch. Now, I'm wondering, like, of course, when we were kids in school, they had those, like, moving TVs with, like, the VCR hooked up and everything. Do you think in 1969 they would have had those setups?
I have no idea.
And also, they would have had to, like, have it hooked to, like...
They
wouldn't have a VCR, because I think VCRs and Betamax were like...
No, they were like watching the live...
Right, they wouldn't have the VCR, but they were like had the live feed. So yeah, they would have like an antenna or something, which they could have had.
I guess antennas are pretty common back then.
Right, I just didn't know if they would have had that actual like TV on a rolling cart type of thing.
It would have been like one of those 900-pound TVs.
Probably. So after class, Indy gets a surprise party thrown for him by the faculty. It turns out that he's getting it's his retirement party. He's getting close to retirement. Indy ends up going for a drink across the street, and he is followed by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who in return is being followed by some sort of African American woman. We find out that Phoebe's character is Helena Shaw, or is it Helena? I always.
Different people pronounce it differently throughout the movie.
And we find out she is Basil's daughter and Indy's goddaughter, who he refers to as Wombat. Helena reveals she is also an archaeologist, and she wants Indy's help finding the dial. Now, there was something that confused me here, because she references something that in a few scenes we'll get a more detailed thing of. But when she was a kid, she heard a conversation with Indy and her dad where Indy promised to destroy the dial. But she, for some reason, thinks that the dial is still in that river in Germany or whatever. And I'm like, why would she think that?
Actually, yeah, I didn't catch that. But yeah, that's a pretty big plot hole. Because she was pretty much there when Basil gave it to him.
Yeah, I was confused why she would have thought that, because I thought she would have actually seen Indy with the dial in his hand.
That and her dad had it like all those years.
Right, that too. So yeah, it confused me. Maybe if I watch it again with subtitles, I can.
I mean, I guess the assumption would have to be that her dad lied to her all those years.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
But then what about the destroying part of it? Yeah, she had to know he had it, so...
Yeah.
It's weird.
She does mention that her father at some point did pass away. And Indy asks why she would want to consume her life trying to find the thing that drove her father crazy. And she replies, "Wouldn't you?" as a nod to, of course, The Last Crusade. Him, going after the Holy Grail that his dad was obsessed with. So we find out that Dr. Voller is in a hotel room. Must be close by, too, in the city. I believe they mentioned they're in New York City, right? I believe at some point he mentions that.
It's definitely a big city. I'm not sure.
Dr. Voller is now going by Schmidt, apparently to hide his Nazi past. But then why would he pick a very German name?
I know.
Like, if I hear someone's last name is Schmidt, I'm going to be like, Nazi?
Yeah, when he was trying to explain to that lady, like, oh, I'm not that guy. My name is Schmidt. I was
Franklin
like,
Snitler.
It's a lateral move, yeah.
We find out that he now works for the U.S. government, and he helped design the rocket that's going to the moon. So he has two henchmen named Kleber and Hawk. Hawk is the really, like, hulking guy.
There is one really big-ass guy.
Yeah, and then the other guy is the mustache, almost seems like a Texan type.
Oh, yeah.
Guy.
He's like a... like a weasel guy.
So here's the weird thing is, like, these guys work for some sort of U.S. agency. I don't know if it's the CIA or what.
The thing is, it's not clear.
It's not clear.
But like half of them are Russian.
But these two guys seemingly are in line with Voller's plan. Like they're Nazi sympathizers.
Right.
Whereas we'll get into it, it seemed like other people in the agency like aren't necessarily.
I feel like maybe it's like a CIA and KGB plus some Nazis.
It's very kind of weird, yeah. So Indy takes Helena to a storeroom at his college that has a bunch of artifacts in it, and he reveals that he has that half of the dial, and like she starts kind of playing with it. So, okay, the female black agent that we saw earlier, her name is Mason, and she tells her boss, another agent in this mysterious agency, about Indy, and the boss demands that they find a file like on who he is. Her character baffles me because I was like, because she's in the agency, but we get the sense early on that she's not like the other two, that she's not a Nazi sympathizer, which makes sense given that she's black. But you kind of, like, in my head, I was like, okay, probably by the end of this movie, like, she's going to be on the good guys team or something. But as we get into, like, her character, like, they end up doing nothing significant with her to the point where I'm like, what was the purpose of her character, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was weird what ends up, happening to her. This also kind of confused me. So Kleber and Hawk join Mason and they enter the college, I guess initially looking for info on Indy because they want that file on him. But my thing is, they've been following Indy and Helena, so wouldn't they just kind of like, wouldn't their primary goal to be to just like follow them and like steal the dial?
Well, they were following Helena, and like he came up as like a side that they wanted more info on. But like, why are they even following her, really? I mean, she hasn't done anything significant.
Well, that's not.
Well, she stole some artifacts she was selling.
That's exactly it. She has a past of selling illegal artifacts, as we'll find out.
But
later.
Mads is specifically looking for the dial. So I don't know.
I mean, he probably figures she has a connection to it because he knows who her father was.
I guess it's
I think she had
convoluted.
already reached out to him to sell it to him, right? At this point,
I don't think so.
because like they meet up later, and he's like, "Okay, you told me this much, and I already bought this from you. Now you're reneging on the deal, basically."
Well, if she made a deal with him, it would have to have been a little after this scene because this is where she gets the dial. So I'm not sure exactly. So anyway, these guys first they're going through paperwork trying to find information on Indy. When they are discovered by Indy's secretary, Kleber shoots and kills her and says their orders are not to leave any witnesses. And a part of me is like, listen, I get that it's like the CIA or whatever, but really, are they doing anything like bad enough that they have to eliminate witnesses?
Right.
We infiltrated a college archaeology department.
Exactly.
Don't let anyone find out.
Exactly. It doesn't seem like something they would have to do that before, but they do. And then also another old man that works at the college shows up and he's executed as well. And Mason seems against this, again, kind of setting up that she, even though she works for the agency, like, she's not cool with what these guys are doing.
Yeah, it sounds like there's definitely two agencies involved, so I'd say she's the CIA and they're something else.
Whatever they are. So the agents do now discover Indy and Helena in the storeroom. Indy knows that Helena is hiding something from him, so he like puts her against a wall and like tries to question her. But she ends up taking the dial and running off. She escapes that room they're in, but actually locks Indiana in with the bad guys. So at this point, her character is like, I guess, okay with him getting killed, seemingly.
Seems like it.
That's why I'm like, initially they do write her character as a kind of a pretty scummy person that's doing bad things.
Ultimately, he just rolls with it, though. It's like, I still love you, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, like he did know her as a kid, and she is technically his goddaughter, even though he hasn't had contact with her in forever. So Indy ends up pushing over a row of artifacts in order to escape that room.
That's another part. I was like, would this be the key choice of an archaeologist?
I mean,
It's like, we've got all this extra pottery back here. It's not that important. I'll just knock over multiple rows of this.
well, he
shit.
was desperate.
Yeah.
So Kleber and Mason end up chasing Helena across the rooftops. Indy ends up discovering that dead guy and his dead secretary. And like when he's checking on his secretary, he gets her blood on his hand, which he also ends up getting on a telephone when he calls the cops. But as he calls the cops, some of the other bad guys show up. I think maybe like the huge guy too. So he's interrupted there, and they end up taking him hostage. Helena ends up losing Kleber and Mason, so they rejoin with Indy and the other agents. And they put him in a van, but because of the parade, they can't use the van.
They get stuck in a side street.
So the bad guys are forced to walk rather than drive. So they take Indy into the street, and he ends up getting the crowd all like wound up, saying like "Hell no, we won't go," or some sort of thing like that. I don't remember exactly, but he gets them all wound up, which lets him like escape down the road a little ways. He tries to get this cop, a horse cop, to help him, but he doesn't really. I think they end up shooting that cop or something. So he steals the cop's horse, and goes off. This was also heavily featured in the trailer to the movie. So he ends up getting pursued by Kleber, who gets on a motorcycle, and Hawk, who gets in a stolen car. They end up cornering Indy, causing him to have to escape through the subway. Voller gets a phone call from, I think, Mason, and he's informed of what happened. So he cancels his meeting with the president. Like, apparently he was supposed to meet with the president of the United States, and he's like, nope, no, I got to deal with this. So now Indy's on the street. He sees a TV that has a news story. So apparently, like, because his blood or handprint with his secretary's blood or whatever was found at the scene, like they're trying to set him up for the secretary's murder and the murder of the old guy as well.
I mean, so they already had his fingerprints on file to like check against?
Maybe.
Faster than your average police work.
Well, I mean, you get the sense that like this government agency is trying to set him up, so they might have resources. I don't know.
Yeah, you got the CIA involved.
They could just be lying about it, but they're the CIA, you know. So this homeless man shows up, and like he sees the news story, and he's about to like reveal to everybody that, you know, he found the guy suspected of murder. But just in the nick of time, Sala shows up and he punches that homeless guy right
That
out.
evil homeless guy.
And he gives Indy a ride to, like, I guess his apartment.
Sometimes people just need a lesson in minding their own fucking business, you know?
So Sala tells Indy that Helena has a sordid past with a hotel owner in Tangier, Morocco, which is in northern Africa. And she has stolen artifacts and antiques before and sold them. And she's now headed back to that hotel because they're going to hold another illegal auction. And so he puts it together that she's probably going to auction off the dial. So Sala drives Indy to the airport. He actually volunteers to go with him, but Indy declines. He's like, it's not that type of adventure. Like, go home to your family. Okay, so on the plane, we get a flashback to that scene they referenced before, where Indy promised, like Basil apparently got like obsessed with the dial, and he was kind of going crazy. And he gives the dial to Indy, but he's like, you got to promise to destroy this thing. And Indy,
Which seemed like stupid because he was about to destroy it himself and Indy stopped him.
I was thinking that same thing. Like, he was about to take a hammer to it, and Indy stopped him. So like, given that's the case, like, why would he think Indy would destroy it?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't he just be like, no, leave me alone for a second. I'm going to destroy this thing.
Yeah. You're clearly not going to do it.
We also do get the sense, though, that maybe Basil like has gone, somewhat crazy.
Yeah.
Like he's not all there. So a 12-year-old Helena looks on, and that's the thing is like we were referencing earlier. That's what confuses me about her thinking the dial was in the river because like she overhears this conversation, and I would think she saw Indy leave with the dial. So I was just not exactly sure. I mean, maybe you could argue she did know that Indy had it,
but she was just trying to play like she didn't know.
right?
Yeah.
That could be that explains it maybe. Okay, so Indy shows up to that hotel in Morocco, and we are introduced to Teddy. I wrote AKA Middle Eastern Short Round.
Right.
And he's like playing with these like fake airplane controls, like trying to learn how to fly, which is kind of weird that somebody would have just gutted an airplane and put the controls there, but whatever. He tries to stop Indy from entering the auction because he's like, it's invitation only, but Indy just like pushes past him. And Indy interrupts Helena, who is in the process of selling the dial. I don't remember their whole conversation here, but they do end up getting kind of in like a bickering with each other, getting a fight here, and until Voller ends up showing up. So now this big fight breaks out. And this scene was also in the trailer where like they all pull guns on him. He like cracks his whip and they all pull guns and start shooting. He ducks below. But anyway, in the chaos of all that, Teddy ends up running off with the dial. But he's quickly stopped by Voller and his men who intercept the dial. And then as Voller is escaping down the elevator, he tells Indy that he will see him in the past. So Indy and Helena run outside. Now, I thought this was weird because I swear when he went into the hotel that it was kind of at night. But when they run out here, like it's broad daylight.
I'm not sure.
I'd have to rewatch it, but I think that was kind of the case. So I thought it was kind of weird. So they're running after Voller, but they end up getting stopped by the police. They put their hands up. But then the police end up leaving when they show that the hotel owner, who basically probably owns the police, essentially shows up.
Well, wasn't he supposed to be some big mobster or like
Yeah.
He
chic or something?
right, like he owns this hotel, but he's also I think you're right. He's like he big time mobster. So it's revealed that this guy is super pissed off because apparently Helena was once supposed to like marry him, and that didn't work out. So Helena and Indy end up running off from these bad guys, and they escape on I believe it's called a tuk-tuk or
tuk-tuk.
with Teddy. It's kind of like a cart, but like a motorcycle surrounded by a cart, basically.
These tuk-tuks were surprisingly fast.
They're very fast. But you know what? I think that might be true to life. I think maybe even in real life they can go
pretty good.
pretty good, yeah.
Because, I mean, they got the three wheels. It seems like if you took a corner at more than like 15 miles an hour, you're going to tip over.
Now, that's probably true. Yeah, I would think if you cornered too fast, you'd be in trouble on one of those things. So as they are being chased by that hotel owner guy, they see Voller's car and they try to pursue to get the dial back. But they end up crashing down this set of stairs. And once down there, because he kind of gets stuck on a stair, so Helena and Teddy switch to a different tuk-tuk and they go off. And then Indy gets his going again and he pursues them. So Indy and Helena, they kind of like start crashing into each other, and they have an exchange. This is kind of what you were saying, where like there'll be an action scene going off, but you will get like dialogue from the people that kind of like builds their character a little. So Indy and her kind of exchange words. He says that Basil would be ashamed of her. Eventually, Indy's ride gets destroyed, and he gets on Helena and Teddy's tuk-tuk. Helena jumps. So they catch up to Voller's car now. And I got to question, like, the geography of the city and the fact that they were able to find his car again.
It's interesting in some of those cities because they're so like organic, like they built houses wherever and like the roads are everywhere
Right,
and there's
they-
stairs and
Yeah. But they do catch up. Helena jumps on Voller's car, and her and Indy almost get the dial wrestled away from him until that hotel owner guy shows up and is about to, like, I guess, hit into the car. So Indy is forced to save Helena and pull her off the car, and they end up driving away from the bad guys. Voller's car is immediately stopped by, I guess, the Moroccan authorities and forced to leave the country. So Indy and Helena, they slow down and stop. Well, they're tuk-tuk. They have to, like, repair it with gum or something.
yeah.
But they end up kind of agreeing to work together because, like, now that Voller has his half of the dial, they're like, of course, we got to try to find the other half before he does. Which, honestly, I don't know if it's a good idea because if left to his own devices, do you think Voller would have ever found the other half of the dial? Probably not.
Yeah, not without their help.
Well, that's another thing. It's so weird that they're going looking for this other half of the dial, but apparently, like, Basil knew where it was all these years, and he never went for it or anything.
Well,
They had to go through like his notebook to find the shipwreck.
oh, yeah, I was wondering about that. Okay. Okay. So apparently to find the other half of the dial, they first need to find this map that also has some weird name. And that map, they figure, is hidden in the sea off the coast of Athens. I wrote, luckily, Indy knows a great diver who lives there, and Helena can likely read the code that's on the map. She knows there's going to be a code on it. Archimedes had two possible codes he would have used, and like one of them she knows very well because her dad taught it to her. But there is another one that she doesn't know, so there's still like a 50-50 chance there. So we get the whole classic Indiana Jones red line going across the map type of transition to Athens. We do get a scene in between though where on a plane, Voller is being forced back to America by Agent Mason, like, I guess back to meet the president or whatever. But he insists on pursuing the dial, and in the process, he shoots and kills Mason, the black female agent. And when this happened, I don't know about you guys, but I was just like flummoxed. I was like, wait, they're just going to kill her? Like, what purpose did she really serve?
Yeah.
Like, they didn't do anything interesting with her at all.
Yeah, it just seemed like a waste of a character.
Yeah,
I was perplexed at that point. So Indy shows up in Athens, and we are reduced to Ronaldo, apparently played by Antonio Banderas, but I didn't recognize him for some reason. So on the way to the dive site, Helena reveals the likely spot where the map is due to, and this is what you were referencing, there was some ancient ship that wrecked. I didn't realize that she was like using her father's I guess his own Grail diary kind of,
Yeah, I
like his
guess.
research. But yeah, apparently there was a ship that went down there, and they figure they would have had the map on them.
Well, there was like a shipwreck, and like half the ship like beached on the top of a cliff, and the other half slid down. So they found the first half in the top part, and no one dived down to check the second half of the wreck or something.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
You know how ships hit tops of cliffs.
Yeah. 1 in a billion chance.
We also get a scene where Helena is playing a card trick with the crew, where like she, says pick a card, and she says what it is, and she's always right. And she does that with Indy, and she tells Indy she can make him think she's giving him a choice of what card he's choosing, but actually make him choose exactly what card she wants him to. This whole mind game of like her being in control. We do get a scene where Helena asks Indy what he would do with the ability to time travel. And so he reveals that his son, Mutt, who was introduced in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, he apparently died. He signed up for the military, and he died in war. Given that this is 1969, I wrote presumably Vietnam. Is that what you would guess? Is he probably died in Vietnam, given the year here?
I don't remember the years of Vietnam.
I think like 65 to 75. Anyway, that's what I'm suggesting. And apparently, like, Marion's grief from his death is what ended up ending their marriage.
I just want to say thank God they had the common sense to kill him.
I thought it was kind of funny because everybody hated his character in that movie, and it's like, well, he's dead.
That was easy.
Shia LaBeouf is no more.
It became a convenient plot point.
So as they're getting ready for the dive, Helena notices a stick of dynamite, and Indy basically tells her to leave it alone. They do have a scene where they see an eel in the water, which, of course, Teddy jokes, looks like a snake.
This felt like an Easter egg to Princess Bride to me.
I still haven't seen The Princess Bride.
What?
I know it's weird, but what happens?
They're just on a ship, and there's like these man-eating eels in the water, like bubbling around.
Yeah, because at first it was so quick. He's like, was that a shark? And the guy's like, no, there's no sharks here. It was an eel.
Yeah, just watch out in case they bite you.
Yeah.
Their jaws really lock on.
Right. So the team dives down. It's Indy, Helena, Antonio Banderas, and I guess just like another one of his guys.
Which another thing, why in the fuck would you take those two down there who have no diving experience? It's a horrible decision.
Kind of true. Maybe they insisted upon it. So they do find that shipwreck, and they see that there's this box in there that looks like it's probably what contains the map. So they grab that box, but when they do, here we get the gross out scene. They're attacked by a bunch of eels. Helena, we get a scene where like they're mostly attacking Indy. Helena kind of gets away, and he's got like a flare out, but they're like eating the shit out of him or whatever. And we get a scene where Helena pulls Indy to safety, showing that maybe she's not so bad after all, kind of thing. She could have left him to die, but she did come back and save him.
I've heard of like underwater welders, and they'll be welding, and like for some reason it fascinates them, and they'll come up like right beside you.
Oh, the eels?
Yeah.
Oh God, that was scared the shit out of me. They are creepy. Man.
Yeah. No thanks.
So back on the boat, Teddy sees that there's a ship heading towards them, and the team also notices it from underneath the water. And they kind of see like there's men jumping from that ship to their ship. And then I think they end up getting like their oxygen cut off from the bad guys.
The thing is, like, it didn't really make a ton of sense to me because they cut the one guy's course straight away, and he was just like died and sank down. And then, like, everyone else had time to come up.
Well, they, like, hit the thing on their...
Yeah, they had their inflatable vests.
Yeah, and so they, come up to the surface. But, yeah, when we get up there, exactly what you thought happened. Dr. Voller and his men have taken over the ship, and they killed one of Ronaldo's men. So Voller opens up the box, which has the clue. And this thing is basically just a square block, I think they say made of, like...
wax, isn't it?
Wax and wood, yeah. And it has the code written on it. First, Voller tries to get Indy to read it, but he refuses. So Voller kills Ronaldo. So then Helena agrees to translate it if Voller will pay her. And like Indy's like, he's not going to pay you. But then he just straight up like gives her a bag of diamonds that are worth like a ton of money, even more than what she asked for.
Which would you really trust that in the middle of the ocean?
That's what I was thinking. Well, we'll get to it, but she really doesn't. Anyway, Helena is translating this thing, and she says that the other half of the dial is located in Archimedes' tomb in Alexandria. She says like there's 9 pillars or something, and it's under one of those pillars. But as she's talking, she kind of turns her ass to Indy, revealing that she has a stick of dynamite in her back pocket. And she ends up kind of giving her cigarette to Indy, or she has hold of it, but she's like gives him like the indication that she wants him to light the dynamite, which he does. So Helena throws the dynamite at Voller, and she, Indy, and Teddy escape with this wax tablet on the boat that Voller came on. Voller and his men survive by throwing the dynamite down below. Like it blows up, but it doesn't kill them.
It's pretty questionable tactic on a boat, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you use what you got.
But also, like, okay, they didn't die in the blast, but wouldn't you think that boat would be fucked up enough that it's sinking?
Yeah,
A
especially
full stick of dynamite, yeah.
it fell towards the very bottom too.
Right.
Didn't the guy also have like more dynamite like in a drawer?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, that's maybe a bad combo.
Luckily, that didn't go up. But yeah, I was thinking, like, okay, they didn't die, but shouldn't their boat be a little worse than for wear? So it's revealed that Helena misled Voller, and the dial isn't in Alexandria. It's actually in Sicily. And I think she put that together because of the fact that the thing was made of wax and wood and was like heavier than you would think or whatever. So because the thing's so heavy, Indy pours alcohol on it and he burns the wax off, which reveals a gold disc inside that has a clue that says the dial will be in the cave of Dionysus, which isn't he the god of wine and orgies? Apparently this cave is in Sicily. Now here's another thing is like Voller just like looks through the binoculars and he's like, oh, they're heading in the wrong direction, so she must have lied to me.
That's another thing. They're out here on this damaged boat, and he watches them sail into the sunset. And like it's gonna come up in a minute when they, like somehow he knows exactly where they're at again. Like also, how did they find them on the ocean anyway?
Well, to be fair, when she's going through the clue for him, she references something about it could be in one of two places because Archimedes only lived in two different places. So he knows a little bit about it. So he knows that if it's not in Alexandria, it's in Sicily.
That makes sense.
So that part of it, I'm okay with. To me, it's just like, how is the boat not damaged enough that they end up getting there?
Well, how did they find them on the ocean? Do you know how hard it is to find someone on the ocean?
What do you mean find them?
Well, like they're out there diving, and then like, you know, while they're in the water, the Nazi boat comes up.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, because, you know, it was apparently Basil's research that led them to that site. So how they would have figured that out, that's a good question. That's just something, a leap of logic. I don't know.
This would just be a good, convenient time for Nazis to show up.
So in Sicily, as Indy and Helena are getting ready, Teddy wanders off with an ice cream cone, and he ends up getting captured by Voller and his men, which also seemed like a convenient thing that he would just happen to wander to where they were. They would spot him. They would get him. Indy does witness them putting him in a van and driving off. But he tells Helena, oh, don't worry, they won't hurt Teddy, and that they must go to the cave and get the dial first. These guys wouldn't possibly hurt a child. They find the cave, and apparently there was like they're following the clues that was on that disc, and they have to go to where the cave echoes the most. So they're shouting, and they go to the spot where the echoes the loudest. Indy notices this crescent shape, and he's like, "That matches the crescent shape that's on the golden disc." So they climb up there. We get a scene where Indy like is struggling to climb up, you know, because he's all old and broken. They kind of go past this rickety bridge that'll come into play later. Helena tells the story of how she found Teddy, and Indy's basically like, oh, you know, you seem maybe a little more caring than you let on. Maybe you're not a big piece of crap, you know, basically. Okay. So Voller's men, they enter the cave, and I guess they can tell where they climbed up from like the rocks and dirt or whatever.
That's another thing. It's like a big like tourist spot apparently.
Yeah.
They have to come after hours, but then like they find this chamber that apparently nobody has ever found.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's not like it was really like hidden. It seems like somebody might have stumbled onto it. We get another kind of gross out scene where similar to Temple of Doom, but where Indy and Helena get covered in like bugs, you know.
Oh yeah, was there a tarantula on him or something?
I think like tarantulas, centipedes, millipedes, all that kind of good stuff.
I'd rather deal with the tarantulas than the centipedes.
Than
a centipede? Millipedes are harmless.
Oh yeah, I've heard centipedes are poisonous, but millipedes aren't.
Yeah.
we get a scene where Teddy tries to run away from the bad guys, but they catch him and they handcuff him to Hawk, which is like the huge guy. So now coming back to that rickety bridge, Hawk is so big that him and Teddy fall through. Right before they fell, Teddy, because he's like a pickpocket, he steals the handcuff key. And so they go down, and there's like this grate in the water, and Teddy is able to unhandcuff himself and then handcuff Hawk to that grate. So Teddy escapes, but then Hawk is just forced to drown, basically.
Well, like he was going to drown anyway because the water's forcing him against that grate.
That's true.
But why is there a grate in this undiscovered?
I was thinking that too because it looked like rebar or something,
Right.
And I was like, well, wait, this is like this ancient tomb. Like, why would they have had that there?
Yeah, it was weird, but yeah.
Okay, so Indy and Helena kind of get to the tomb, and there's like this pool of water that smells like methane. And I found it funny because like she was complaining about it, and he's like, don't breathe the methane. But then like he doesn't cover his mouth at all. He's just like, oh, I'm old. I can't smell shit.
So, yeah, he said that, and he was also like, we need to get out of here.
Right.
And then he's like, just fucking around.
right. So Indy, like, he finds some clue, and he puts it together that they have to displace some of the water in this pool. So they put like these heavy like blocks or gears or something that are there. So that displaces enough water, which opens up a secret passage beneath them that goes to Archimedes' remains. And there is the other half of the dial. So they do notice some weird time anomalies, including the fact that Archimedes is wearing a wristwatch. And there's also like this depiction of a bird, but she notices like, oddly enough, that there's also depictions of like a plane propeller.
Right.
And like, what's the deal here? So just like happens anytime they find something, Voller shows up, you know, and gets them. So he ends up putting the dial together. Now Teddy does show up in this room on top of a statue, and he jumps on one of Voller's men, which leads to a gunfight. During the fight, Indy gets shot in the shoulder, and Helena and Teddy run away. They have to run away without him.
This is another one of those like flesh wounds where like I really hate it when someone gets shot and it's like 10 seconds later it's like, yeah, you know, I'm pretty much fine.
Yeah, it sucks, but I'm fine, really.
I like those like the spaghetti westerns where Clint Eastwood would get shot up and like he'd be crawling through the dirt and you're like, this motherfucker's dying. He is straight gonna fucking die, you know?
You know, my favorite thing is in Death Proof, where Kurt Russell gets hit and he does turn into a straight up bitch, just like a
Just
guy
keeps
who's
getting punched
actually
in the
would.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good scene where they're just kicking his ass.
Okay. So Voller has his men take. This is what you were kind of referencing. Once again, instead of killing him, Voller's like, "Oh no, we'll take him along so he can see me become like the Nazi ruler of the world." So Indy is thrown into Voller's van. Helena and Teddy witness this, so they follow them on a motorcycle. So now Voller reveals his plan to Indy. He's going to use the dial to travel back to 1939 and I guess kill Hitler, and then he will lead the Nazis.
Yeah, he's going to be the emperor, but he's just going to do it the right way so the Nazis win.
Yeah, and there was a scene from earlier where, like, when he was in the hotel, like, he had a scene with this black man who used to be in the military, and he's like, you know, Germany... Or the Americans didn't win the war; Hitler lost it.
Right.
So he's got like he's like the Nazi thing is right, but Hitler wasn't the right man. Now I don't exactly understand how the dial works because it seems like you still like it somehow computes to a latitude and longitude. So like it works, but you still have to be in the right place for it to work.
Well, the whole workings of that thing is so convoluted because essentially they say it finds fissures in time that you can travel through.
Right.
But then somehow you're supposed to be able to set it to go where you want. And so he's supposed to set it to 1939 or whatever. And Indiana Jones is saying like, well, there's some technicality where like you're miscalculated because
Continental drift.
continental drift, and he didn't know about this. But then it magically takes them right to the spot where Archimedes is, and they're like, "Oh, this was all part of Archimedes' plan."
Yeah.
You're like, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
It didn't. It really didn't. Yeah, I didn't understand that bit because it's like he's like the continental drift, but like it still ends up taking him to the portal where he thought it was, but then somehow he knew the timing would be wrong. Yeah, it was very convoluted. But let's
Not only did he know about continental drift, he knew how to trick you into setting it to go to Syracuse.
let's go back a little bit. So Voller takes Indy on a plane, and Helena and Teddy look on. So Helena asks Teddy. They see a small plane in the distance, and she asks Teddy if he thinks he can fly that small plane so they can follow. And Teddy's like not sure, but he's like, I'll go try to start it. But as he's doing that, I guess Voller's plane takes off, so Helena just decides to pursue on the motorcycle rather than get in the plane. So she does, and she eventually is able to get on the plane, like commando style, like through the wheel well or whatever.
Yeah, and she ends up in some like bottom compartment.
Right. So Teddy does get the other plane started, and he starts pursuing. We get a scene where we find out there's actually a Nazi soldier sleeping in the back of that plane.
Was he a Nazi? He was like the normal pilot.
Oh,
I mean, I don't know. There were a lot of Nazis on that base. I guess he's a Nazi. I don't know.
yeah, I didn't think of that because they are technically in Sicily, so maybe it wasn't a Nazi. Maybe it was
Just an Italian pilot.
Italian pilot, maybe. That could be. So as they head towards the time portal, Indy somehow puts it together that due to continental drift, they won't be going to 1939. Voller does try to reverse course, but it's too late. And so they end up going 2,000 years into the past, witnessing a war with the Romans, I guess.
Was it part of the Peloponnesian War? I don't know.
It was
I
like
forgot what they said.
Yeah, I don't know my ancient history.
just the Romans attacking the Greeks, right?
I think so. Yeah, it's got to be, right? Teddy's plane also makes it through, and that pilot kind of wakes up and freaks out. So the Romans, they think the planes are dragons, and they begin to fire on them. Which, couldn't they just go up high enough to out of the range?
It doesn't seem like you'd have to go very high to be out of a range of like ship catapults or whatever the fuck they have.
So Archimedes himself is working on the dial when he sees the planes, and he basically realizes, oh, I must succeed in my attempt here.
Right. So his whole plan, apparently Archimedes' whole plan, is to build this thing and to so send it off so like someone in the future will find it and come and help them win the war. It's very convoluted, but like also like his plan for someone to find in the future is to break it into multiple parts and like make it really hard to find.
Yeah.
But also, I'm not a
Way to go, genius!
I'm not a student of history. Did the Greeks eventually beat the Romans? I don't know how that shaked out.
They won that like one battle, and eventually they lost.
So this plan isn't a great plan, really. Okay, so Archimedes rides his horse out to take a look. Voller's men begin shooting at the Romans because they're getting attacked by the Romans. Helena reveals herself, and she drops most of Voller's men out of the bomb hatch of the plane. But she also falls, and she's dangling, and like a Nazi ends up dangling from her leg. Indy somehow, I don't know if he shoots or he knocks that Nazi off of her.
Yeah, I think he shoots him.
And tries to save Helena. This causes Voller to get involved. I believe Helena ends up shooting Voller, and that allows Helena and Indy to parachute to safety. I don't remember exactly, but she gets him off somehow. I think she shoots him, but I'm not sure. So they parachute to safety, and then Voller's plane just crashes and he dies.
Yeah.
Fiery death. There's a Roman soldier who sees Indy and Helena parachute out, and he decides to pursue them on the ground. Okay, so Archimedes discovers the plane wreckage with the completed dial and Voller's watch, which explains the time anomalies from earlier, the watch and
The propeller,
the propellers and everything. The old time paradox. So the Roman soldier shows up. It tries to kill Indy, but he's instead killed by Archimedes' men. Archimedes asks Indy where he came from, and he tells him from 2,000 years in the future. So now Indy tells Helena that he is dying, and he wants to actually stay in the past and just die in the past. She pleads with him, but he refuses to go with her and Teddy. And so she ends up knocking him out, punching him out. Now, this happens in movies a lot, but okay, Indy wakes up back in his apartment, all bandaged up. But do we think her punch knocked him out, and that's literally the first time he waked up since?
Part of me was thinking she should have just punched him in the bullet wound. That would have been more effective.
My bullet wound.
That would have set you down, you know?
So yeah, Indy wakes up. Helena says that she had to bring him back to protect the timeline, protect history, and also so that he could live. And I think he has a line something like, live for who or live for what or whatever. And right on cue, Marion shows up with some groceries. Helena and Teddy leave so that they can talk to each other. And they basically make up with each other and start making out. Indy and Marion. Outside, Helena and Teddy walk away, and the camera pans up to Indy's hat on a clothesline, and the movie ends with Indy's hand reaching out and grabbing his hat, making me think that Indy must have sex with the hat on.
I was assuming that menu was finished.
Oh, you think it was finished and was like off to the next adventure?
Old people sex.
I mean, that was a short sex session then, but I got the feeling that he was like, no, I'm going for a ride. He's putting the hat on, but maybe you're right. But yeah, that is how the movie wraps up. Is there anything I missed that you guys think would be worth talking about?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
That was pretty much everything, I think.
I tried to be thorough. It took me a while to put these notes together. I was just like, oh yeah, then I remember this scene. Oh yeah, now I remember this scene.
Nazis.
Did you like that they did like a time travel gimmick with the artifact?
I was kind of okay with it. It's kind of a classic kind of like a sci-fi thing almost. But yeah, it's an interesting ending. I was okay with it. I mean, I guess part of me is like the Temple of Doom was like kind of the most. I mean, there was like mythology involved, but it was also like he could write it off as coincidence. It's like this time he actually time traveled, or like in the skulls, like there's actually shit going on. I mean, I guess in the Temple of Doom you had the full, or the Ark, you have the full like people being melted by
Right.
space ghosts or whatever the fuck that was.
My God. A part of me wouldn't mind seeing like a Helena Shaw movie, like her adventures. But the thing is, if you do a prequel before this, she would have been kind of a bad person. Yeah. And if you do adventures after this, it's like, oh, it's in the 70s. Like, it just seems like a weird time period to have like pulp adventures, you know?
70s. Yeah, I don't know. You can do anything.
Do you think like if they eventually do recast and do more Indiana Jones movies in like 30s or 40s? Do you think it's bad to have him be like a James Bond type that hooks up with a different woman in every single movie?
Well, I mean, he definitely did some jumping around, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems so cliche.
I mean, Ilsa's dead. Got to do something.
It's been forever since I saw the first movie, but apparently there is a line where like it infers that like when him and Marion like first got together, she was only 16 and like he was an adult, you know?
On the other hand, he drank the water from the Holy Grail, so maybe they could just keep going. Maybe they should have made him young throughout the whole, like still in the 70s, and you could just keep making movies into the future. Indiana Jones in the 80s, Indiana Jones in the 90s.
They do the same thing Star Wars did with, what's her name?
Who's that?
that lady who died, who they keep putting in the movies.
Oh, Carrie Fisher.
Carrie Fisher, yeah, his co-star.
I'll say I felt like Harrison Ford did a more serious job on this than in Star Wars, where he was just like, "Oh fuck it," and then he gets stabbed, and thrown off a bridge.
He was done with Star Wars.
Yeah. He did like some interview, and someone was like, "Were you nostalgic, to reprise this role?" And he's like, "Well, I got paid."
He's like that though. He never seems enthusiastic about these things.
I feel like he's kind of fitting into himself as like the grumpy old man. Like that was part of the role.
For sure.
It's like, yeah, let's just roll with it.
God, I was trying to think. I had another thought about the movie, but now I forgot it. But yeah, I think this was solid. So let's get down to the voting round, guys. What would you give this on a scale of 1 to 10? For me personally, I think I'm going to go with a 6.5. I think it was solid, but not superb.
Yeah, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It was good. It wasn't great. It was all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd roll with a 7. It was decent, but not perfect.
Certainly more enjoyable than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But Last Crusade, man, perfect movie.
It's hard to one up the Holy Grail.
As an art, that is another thing. Like I don't have an extensive knowledge of famous artifacts,
Right.
but it's like you got to choose like a notable artifact, and then you got to make give it some sort of magical,
Right.
interesting property.
I mean, part of me is like, yeah, Archimedes was a genius, but there's no fucking way, pal.
Yeah. He destined somebody to come in the future to save them in a battle. Like, there's too much going into that.
And then they show up and they're like, sorry, pal, we can't help you. Get us on that plane and let's get the fuck out of here. But then Archimedes still put it like when he died, apparently.
Yeah.
He's like, well, we don't want to upset the timeline.
Yeah.
The thing of it is like, I guess you could argue that like his time travel device ended up for allowing them to win that particular battle. But it's not like he had you would almost thought he would have wanted to keep that intact plane that Teddy was in for some sort of can we use this technology again to help us?
Yeah.
Or at least take their machine guns. Actually, that's a good question. Like, I know his plane wrecked, but there's a good chance there was still a workable machine gun in there. Of course, they would have ran out of bullets.
But they could have learned how to engineer.
They
it.
find his corpse with like a Luger on it.
It would have been interesting if they went back to the future and the world was conquered by Greeks.
That's another thing. Like, Indy wanted to stay there and fuck up the past. He's like, this is what I really want to do, with my life.
Be the new Genghis Khan, where he has 25% of Europe's kids or something.
I belong in a museum. That is true. That is something that kind of against his character too, because he is an archaeologist. He respects history. You would think he would not want to do something that could really mess up history.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you really love the past, then being in it, being immersed in it, is probably a huge experience for them.
You want to find a Greek woman and do the nasty and the pasty.
Oof. I don't want to deal with a Greek woman from 2,000 years ago. That's probably nasty as hell.
I don't want to deal with syphilis with no cure.
Archimedes will find a cure.
Yeah. Mercury, right in your dick hole.
His whole time travel thing was maybe somebody will bring us a cure for this
syphilis.
burning crotch.
Dang it. This guy, no.
I work so hard. Please. Penicillin.
You guys want to add anything else before we ride off into the sunset at the end of Last Crusade?
No.
I'm good.
All right, guys. Well, we thank you very, very much. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny if you've seen it. And leave us comments about anything. Tell us why Indonesia likes us so much. I'm curious to know. But no, please, we're glad you, if you watched any of our videos up to episode 150, we thank you very much. We hope you'll continue to do so in the future. So make sure to subscribe both on the YouTube channel and on your podcast service of choice. Lester, are you on Twitter at all these days?
Not really.
Okay. Well, you can still find me, if you want, at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. And that'll do it for all of our shenanigans and poppycock this week. Please, please, please tune in again next week.
Take care.
That was so
Have a good one.
All right, bye, guys.
Did you sign off properly?
I did.
No. It did sound.
felt-
It,
yeah, it
it
felt
sounded
different.
normal. Yeah, it didn't. Are you sure?
I did. I said, see everyone again next week. Which
Is that what you used to say?
Yeah, it felt different this time. I don't know why.
Anyway, goodbye and thank you.
Have a good one.